questions without notice. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Yesterday it was revealed that the Federal Police did not have the resources to investigate the importation of 1.6 tonnes of cocaine. But on the very same day, the Prime Minister's Registered Organisations Commission sent at least 25 AFP officers to look at a 10-year-old donation to GETA. How can the Prime Minister find the resources to investigate his political opponents but not the importation of 1.6 tonnes of cocaine?
The Leader of the Opposition's 30 seconds had concluded. There was one question that got asked there after the preamble. I call the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker.
Warned. The member for Sydney has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Yesterday it was revealed that the Federal Police did not have the resources to fully investigate a 1.6 tonne cocaine importation. When the Federal Police already don't have enough resources to do the important work they do, why is this born-to-rule Prime Minister diverting the limited resources of the Federal Police so that he can attack his political opponents?
The Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, we put up with we give the fair tolerance to the opposition.
No, members on my left will cease interjecting.
Mr Speaker, the
Leader of the House will pause for a second. Members on my left will cease interjecting. If members on my left don't cease interjecting, I'll just remove them from the House, interjection by interjection. The Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, the standing orders are very clear about insults and epithets inside the questions, and while we are quite tolerant of the opposition's questions, I think the Deputy of the Opposition's epithet flung at the Prime Minister should be withdrawn and not included in future questions.
The Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. If the reference that the Leader of the House is complaining about had been at the start of the question, in terms of who the question was being directed to, then certainly that would be out of order, as is often the case when questions are asked by government backbenchers. But the claim, words like elitist, words like snobbish have often been included. Born to rule is of the same order as arrogant, and a series of words that have always been allowed and probably are pretty appropriate.
The Minister for Health and members on my right are not assisting. As I said yesterday, and I won't make as long a ruling as I did yesterday, I spent a lot of time reading the practice. Whilst I don't like the term, I don't approve of those sort of descriptives in questions, I couldn't sit here and say they haven't been allowed for many, many years. I will allow the question. The Prime Minister has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. And I thank the honourable member.
The Prime Minister will just pause. He won't need to sit down. This won't take long. The member for Jellybrand will leave under 94A. Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, thank.
I just say to the member for Moreton, every day we have the same conversation. We're not having it today, okay? The Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Given TV cameras turned up at the sites of AFP raids yesterday before the Federal Police even did, can the Prime Minister guarantee that his Employment Minister or her office didn't notify anyone in the press gallery before the raid?
The Prime Minister.
AFP raids yesterday before the Federal Police even did. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that his Employment Minister or her office didn't notify anyone in the press gallery before the raid?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, the Employment Minister will be in, I think, is in estimates even as we speak. So I'm sure we'll be dealing with that. But I can assure, well, Mr Speaker, that can be addressed to you. But I can assure honourable members opposite that the real question here is what happened to that $100,000. That's the real issue, Mr Speaker.
The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order. Just before I call the Manager of Opposition Business,
I've heard stronger
members
defences.
need to cease interjecting or I'm going to take severe action. The Manager of Opposition Business, I'm not criticising him here, when he insists quite rightly that I listen to every word that's said to ensure it complies with the standing orders. It doesn't help the House, the dignity of the House, or its operation, frankly, for there to be a wall of uncontrollable interjections. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Point of order on direct relevance. The question involves no preamble on a very specific issue. The Prime Minister is now saying what the real question is and wanting to go to a completely different issue. I ask you to draw him back to the question.
Over that wall of interjections, I did manage to hear the Prime Minister clearly at the very start of the answer talk about the substance of the question, and he related it to the Minister being in Senate estimates. It couldn't have been more relevant. He's now 30 seconds into the question. I showed some latitude on the member for Sydney's question. I show latitude on preambles, and it cuts both ways. Prime Minister has the call.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister for Employment, has assured me that she did not advise any journalists about the raid, and Mr. Speaker, but she will be in estimates. She's in estimates, I believe, this afternoon, and will no doubt have the opportunity to go into this in great detail. But, Mr. Speaker,
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the Prime Minister went to a double dissolution election to establish his Registered Organisation Commission? The Commissioner was hand-picked by the Employment Minister, and the only reason the Commission is even looking into a 10-year-old donation to GetUp is because the Employment Minister told him to do so.
Members on my right. Treasurer and the Leader of the House, the member for Deakin. Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm his government has sent in the AFP to raid parliamentary offices during an election campaign because the failings of his second-rate NBN were exposed, referred Queensland Labor to the Australian Federal Police over a text message that upset him, and yesterday sent in the AFP to look at a 10-year-old donation to GetUp? Why does this government leave the AFP with no choice but to take police resources needed to fight drug syndicates and divert them to protect the political interests of a born-to-rule Prime Minister?
The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Well, Mr. Speaker,
Lindsay will leave under 94A.
To the Prime Minister. Why hasn't the Prime Minister asked government agencies to undertake any investigations into Australians caught up in the Panama Papers scandal? Why does the Prime Minister continue to protect the banks from a royal commission, despite reports that the Commonwealth Bank allowed money to be laundered by terrorists? Why won't this born-to-rule Prime Minister use his power to do something about misconduct at the top end of town and stop abusing his power to attack people and organisations who highlight his failings?
Members on my left. The Prime Minister has the call.
I am so glad, Mr.
House on a point of order.
I put it to you that the question is not in order because it contains clearly mistakes by saying that the government sent an independent agency in suggesting that we somehow direct the AFP to launch raids on any offices. Now, that is clearly
members on my right.
Not true, and I'm not sure how it can be in order to state a mistruth in the question and then expect the Prime Minister to respond to it. And I think, therefore, it should be reworded or ruled out of order. And if they're looking for hereditary members of Parliament, they should look on the Labor side, because that's where most of them have been over the last few decades.
Members on both sides. This issue's come up before, and In a nutshell, when it comes to both questions and answers, the Speaker is not the arbiter of the truth. Can't be. That's a matter that can be addressed by the person responding to the question. And in allowing the question to go ahead, the Speaker does not verify the factual accuracy of the question, or for that matter, for answers. And there's been a 30-second question. If it's felt that it contains factual inaccuracies, there's 3 minutes now for that to be responded to, and I've addressed that before, as did Speaker Andrew in some detail many years ago. The Prime Minister has the call.
Well,
I just should point out, the member for McEwen is warned, of course. I just should point out, of course, that through the course of the answer, the Prime Minister is entitled to address all of those matters, and there shouldn't, as I indicated earlier, be complaints when these sorts of questions are allowed with the answer itself. So the Prime Minister has the call.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Business.
I move that so much of the standing orders and second orders be suspended as would prevent the Manager of Opposition Business from moving the following motion immediately. That the House 1 notes A. Yesterday it was revealed the Australian Federal Police did not have the resources to investigate the importation of 1.6 tonnes of cocaine. B. On the very same day, the Prime Minister's Registered Organisations Commission sent at least 25 AFP officers to look at a 10-year-old donation to GetUp. C. In doing so, this government diverted police resources needed to fight drug syndicates to protect his own political interests. D. This is just the latest example of this Prime Minister's willingness to abuse his power and debase the office of Prime Minister. And 2. Therefore condemns this born-to-rule Prime Minister for his grubby attacks and blatant abuses of power designed to protect his own political interests instead of protecting Australians. We have full respect for the integrity of the AFP, but no respect for the integrity of those opposite.
Leader of the House has moved the Manager of Opposition Business be no further heard. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division required, I guess. Ring the bells. Order. The result of the division is ayes 72, no 65. The question is therefore resolved in the affirmative. Is the motion seconded? The member for Grindler.
Hang on, he hasn't said anything.
Leader of the House, resume his seat. I've called the member for Grindler. Is the motion seconded?
I second the motion. This mob have contempt for workers and hatred of workers' representatives.
The Leader of the House has moved the member for Grindler be no further heard. All those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. I appoint the same tellers as the previous division. As always, it would be helpful in this successive division if members were to remain in their places unless they're... Order. The result of the division is ayes 62, no 72. The question is therefore negatived. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.